Hi. So this is just a little bit of an intro that I did to the field work I did on Wednesday in around central New Jersey. And my friend Steffers was telling me that this merge thing was going to be happening with the Ethereum merge from the main net to the beacon chain, proof of work to proof of stake. And I feel increasingly like this transition is what they need to begin advancing the open metaverse, because with the cryptography and the energy intensive nature of proof of work, they weren't going to be able to really scale the metaverse the way they wanted. And I don't think they have it all worked out yet. I don't know. Jason was just telling me a bunch of stuff about sharding and scaling, but they needed to keep progressing. And so part of the progression is this transition. And so I was just thinking back to the fact that in March, when we were at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference, Scott Stornetta was talking about essentially with Stuart Haber inventing sort of the first distributed ledger system way before like the Satoshi Nakamoto stuff. And it was a timestamp document. And he did that actually at Bellcore, which was one of the Bell Labs research areas in central New Jersey. So I thought, given that I'm in Philadelphia, a good way to sort of maybe transmute or set a good intention in this moment of the transition to the merge would be to go to Bell Labs and sort of put down some of my hearts and talk about like what happened there. And I didn't realize when I was like, oh, I'll just go to Bell Labs, there's actually multiple Bell Labs in New Jersey, and there are at least 3 different sites. And so I hit all 3 sites, and in between I did some I connected with some nature, both at a creek with fossil beds and also in the swamp area. So I sort of balanced it all out. And so I just will say the quality is not great because it's just me and my phone pretty much. And I tried to do a live stream from the Bell Labs Holmdel location, and Jason calls me up and he's like, Allison, nobody can hear it. The sound is terrible. And I know a number of you guys have tried to listen to the sound, and it is really bad. So I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if they're jamming my phone or what. But I ended up redoing it, but the camera is foggy, but it gets better if you get through that first one. So if you've listened to it before and it was frustrating, try to listen to this one again, because this one is better. And then it has these other sites, both at Bellcore and at the main Nokia Bell Labs. It's about an hour and 15 minutes or so. So anyway, so I made it to all 3 sites, and I got home about 8:30 Wednesday evening, and then sometime in the early morning of the next day, that merge happened. So I was able to get them all in under the wire. And, I was able to set sort of a nice intention at these fossil beds at the beginning of the day. And I I had a little thing that my friend Steffers had given me about sort of setting this intention and just looking for guidance of what's coming, because we're really, anticipating this trip to California and hoping that it all works out, and just, guidance in what we're doing next, right? Because there's no real handbook on how to do this. And I just want to say that then, like, within 24 hours, we actually got really incredibly generous support for our trip. So it's definitely happening, and I'm super excited. And I think we've met our initial goal. We're talking about really wanting to have maybe a bit of a buffer so that we can print more of Eve's zines to take with us. And also we were maybe reaching out to see if it might be possible for Leo to join us for a little bit in the Bay Area, since he's done such amazing work looking at Cello and the programmable money and all of that. And so there are a few things still bubbling up. So if, we could still use some support. I was going to sort of meet halfway, Jason's, the money that we raised with a fundraiser with my own money. And, but yeah, so anyway, it was just, and even more than the donation, which was really wonderful. Also having the affirmation that there are people out there who, recognize that the way I'm trying to do things in the small group of us that are trying to do things seems to make sense to them. Because I know it's a bit quirky, and I've had some mud thrown my way the last month from various quarters, and I try not to let it get to me, but to have someone who I don't even know, like beyond my immediate circle of friends, step up and say, no, I think this feels right, this feels like like setting these intentions, trying to acknowledge these past harms and trying to see this for what it is with clarity, makes sense to them. And that really meant a lot to me. So thank you. And I hope you enjoy the next hour. And, yeah, it was a great day. It was a really great day. So, and yeah, we got it in just under the wire, just before the merge happened. So check it out. It's a bit off the Garden State Parkway, and this was the campus of Bell Labs, their research division. For many years, it was built in between 1959 and 1962, I think, and it was one of the last projects of Eero Saarinen, Eero Saarnen, who is the son of Elio Saarinen, who was an industrial design engineer at Cranbrook Academy, Finnish, and his son Eero was a well-known modernist architect. And what's behind me is both sort of in that far distance, way over there, is a 2 million square foot corporate campus, this research campus. And it was expanded over time. It's no longer with Bell Labs. It was redeveloped, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so ago. And it's now an emerging technology sort of startup space, co-working space. It has some shops, some restaurants, some gyms and different things in there. And when I went in today, it seemed to be having like a pop-up craft fair, including a tarot booth called Untethered. So I don't know, especially when we're talking about tether and blockchain and all this stuff. It's kind of funny to see Untethered tarot in the middle of the Bell Labs. It's sort of maybe the universe's metaphysical joke on all of us. So this was a center of research, and even before the campus was built, there was research done here, and actually the field of radio astronomy was pioneered here. So these early antennae to like listen to the sounds in the outer galaxies, that groundwork was done here. And I often used to sort of joke that, if there were multiverses, right, and that's something that other scientists have explored, the idea of the multiverse, and that was also part of that film, the Everywhere All at Once, Everything Everywhere All at Once. The idea of branched patterns of different realities depending on the choices that you make at different branching points. I would love to be able to jump us to a different part of the multiverse where our phone company and cable company didn't run the prison planet, along with DARPA and the hedge funds. And I used to sort of joke about that in a general way, but I feel really that it's actually super accurate. And I don't think that people really understand the role of AT&T and Bell, and that it all goes back to Alexander Graham Bell and his telephone, right? And Bell himself was Scottish. His family was from Scotland. They moved to Nova Scotia. And then his father was in elocution, not electrocution, but speaking, elocution. And then his mother became deaf when Alexander Graham Bell was maybe a tween, like 12 years old or so. So he was very interested in sound and frequency. And the work that he was doing around the telephone, it was never just limited to the telephone. A lot of it was early computing. So it was not just like radio astronomy later, but also computational. It became lasers. It was digital music, digital recording of music, and the creation of early transistors, which I had initially thought was mostly Texas Instruments and this California firm, but evidently they must have had a hand in the early development of transistors as well. And this water tower behind me, which is this sort of three-legged water tower that you can see, it looks sort of like War of the Worlds, very modernist, that's the Saarinen design. So it goes, it's said to memorialize the invention of the transistor, but I'm not so sure that that's the case, but it definitely has an otherworldly feel to it. So the other thing that Bell Labs did that I almost forgot till the end of my live stream was that the computing platform protocol Unix was developed by Bell Labs. And Linux, Linux, is a derivative of Unix, Unix. And Linux, the Linux Foundation, is actually a central player in what's called the Trust Over IP Foundation. And that's the key part of how you're going to interface with Web3 and this open metaverse project through your digital identity. And they're in the health space, like the health tracking, public health credentialing space, but also across a lot of other spaces too. So you guys should definitely look into Linux and Trust Over IP, but know that like its origins go back here to Bell Labs, where they had developed the Unix language, programming language. Let's see, what else was I going to say? So this campus, it's very man-made, man-designed. I'm sitting in a lawn of grass. You know, who knows how long it takes to mow all this grass. And then behind me, the building, it's like a 2 million square foot building. It was expanded over time. It's black glass. They called it like the biggest mirror in the world. It's all inward facing. And when I went in, like it's, from a design standpoint, it's interesting. It has these very large atria and sort of walking, hallways facing the atria, but the atria are very contrived spaces, and they're not really that pleasant. Like, they look nice at first, but it's like a giant swath of astroturf with some containerized trees and like a baseball glove seat or a few beanbag chairs, and it's supposed to look casually fun, but it's kind of soulless and it's not actually that fun at all. So I feel like this remake of Bell Labs into this co-working, community, but all inward, like sort of like a cross between a mall and an office park, is sort of what that they're going to be interested in pushing moving forward as a sustainable, smart alternative, and that's very much what AT&T is about. Is that setting all of that up in the smart cities and the digital twinning. But do we want that? Because I started off the day actually out at in nature, because I wanted to be very intentional about starting it from a point in nature and time, because the next place I'm going to go has to do with time stamping, and I think it's time stamping in the multiverse. And it was called Poricy Fossil Beds, Poricy, in New Jersey, Middletown, New Jersey, which is about 3 miles from here. And it's this beautiful, it's like a little county park, I guess. It's a beautiful creek that cuts through these deep stream beds. And there are fossils from the Cretaceous period, different kinds of shelly creatures, things from the coral. And Jason and Leo and I are going to talk about coral tomorrow. And so like the fractal, the beauty of the coral, and that it's preserved over time in this creek bed. And so people can go there and do some like sifting of the creek bed and take a few items home. And I took a few items and I put them there on the offering that I made at the base of this water tower. But it's such a different version of water, right? You have this water tower here that's like contained in this man-made like War of the Worlds type thing. And then you have a beautiful brook and trees and roots and soil and biogeochemistry, and like in the creek that I kind of played around with it in the creek a little bit just to like connect with the water. And it wasn't very deep, but the water was clear. It was about 8 inches deep or so, and you could see the ripples of the water in the sand at the base because it was very fine silt, and it was 2 kinds. It was a light color and a darker color, and the darker color must have had a different weight. So because the water would make these beautiful patterns under it. And so to me, it's such a contrast of a meandering brook across time in community with trees and minnows and the insects, doing their little thing on the bank, and the water and the wind, and like there were some really big trees. I hugged this giant big poplar tree that just went up like 80 feet, and connecting to nature's landscape. Now, I'm not saying it's all totally like it would have been in the wilderness or anything like that, but it was much more connected to a natural energy than this place, which is all firmly constructed by modernism, right? You will live in the Black Mirror building. You will go to work there. You will build emerging technologies there. You will build computers and lasers and digital music and Unix languages, and you will build the things that will turn the real into the surreal and the hyperreal, right? And we will take the water and we will not have it be in a brook, but we will shove it into this tripod container that you can't even see it, but you're supposed to visualize that the water is up there. And we know that Mini Wichoni, water is life. That is a huge part of it, is like the magic of water and the expression of life in the fractal crystalline universe, right? And so, but they're going to capture it up there in their thing, and so yeah, I guess that's most of what I wanted to say about Bell Labs. I said it before and I missed a few things, but just, yeah, the phone company and the cable company running the prison, like that's sort of our reality. And all of these people going to work to build it, and they don't really understand, because maybe they don't understand they're going to lose touch with the real world and nature. Or maybe they already have and it's not that big of a deal to them. But to me, I'm still fighting for it. Like, oh, look, there's a dragonfly going by. Voronoi pattern in the wings of the dragonfly. So the natural world is still out there for us, but we have to be really cautious, or we might get hijacked into some sort of biometric trust over IP mirror community and never get out, and only live in the world that's sort of this Stepford Wives container world. I guess there's a movie coming out that Stepford's brought my attention to, Don't Worry Darling, which is like this cybernetic smart city in the middle of a desert, and all the men go out to build some crazy defense contract that's top secret, and the women are supposed to stay home, and then weird things start to happen with like the universes merging and melding, right? And so I was trying to come out here today and just bring your attention to the history of Bell Labs, Alexander Graham Bell, frequency, radio astronomy here, right? Because that's part of the whole frequency and bouncing wave patterns, and corporate America, corporate culture, and then like pop-ups, right? Because there's a pop-up arts and crafts fair in there when I go in, and they're selling like gourmet dog biscuits and handmade soaps. And there's the tarot, untethered tarot booth. And I'm thinking like the universe is playing a joke on us with all of this, right? The one benefit was I needed a public restroom, and they had a nice restroom. Although on the mirror, it said, wink, wink, Bell Works. And this is the name of the redevelopment, is Bell Works. There's a parallel one in Chicago, and their logo is actually a cube. So again, the blockchain with these two connected balls in the cube, which to me looks like the quantum connections. And around us on either side of me are two Toll Brothers like townhouse communities, which again are very nice-ish on the surface, but like out of the nosedive era, is this what we want? Is this what we nice on the surface and antiseptic and cybernetic, but we're not in control of any of our things. So I'm just gonna walk over here. Oh gosh, I'm all tangled in these tangles. Oh, here we go. And I'm gonna just, so I'll show you. So there's the thing over there. All right, and here's my offering. So you can see I brought my snake from the hike the other day. So with the Kundalini creative energy of the universe, and I've created a spiral here with this Dusty Miller. My husband got a bouquet for me, and so it spirals around. This is this laser light. There's all these lights around. You can see it up there. This is what's underneath, and then you've got this, I don't know what that is. It's covered in lantern flies. There are all these lantern flies, so I keep thinking, is this maybe a sync with the beacon chain, or us talking about Hero and Leander and the light in the tower yesterday? But so I have some marigold, so energy from sort of those beyond the ancestors. I have some cones for the beautiful fractal of life. Alongside the creek, I picked up a feather, and this is from yesterday, a walnut, a nice green sphere. And these grasses reminded me a little bit of like the untamed corn. So this is my honoring to the corn people. And then you can see that top piece of gray, that's some shell. And to the right is this iron, because in terms of Vernadskian biogeochemistry, the creek bed was pushing up, composing iron out of the elements and pushing it up. So that's that. And we have a little bit of wood aster, which is the fall, it's that season. And then a piece of peridot phosphorate, which Steffers has been telling me about, the primary water, and peridot and phosphorite is part of that. That's actually from the reservation in Arizona. So, and I used up all the last of my dandelions from Rochester. You can see some there from the little, so I left a bunch of dandelions here. You can see that. And then, and this is the piece. So this is my heart. Some of the marigold petals have blown away, but I made it with the little rocks from the creek. And this thing underneath is actually a silk flower that I found in the grass, which is odd because there's, like, if you sort of look around, it's pretty antiseptic here. It's just like there's a lot of nothing. There's a few dandelions and a few clover, but it's just a lot of green nothing. But as I walked back to get a picture of the water tower, this caught my eye, and it is a silk
flower, piece of a silk flower, but it almost looks like cell division. And or maybe the twin universes or the connection. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I figured I would put some love on it and some marigolds and hope for the best. And then I'm leaving a little bit of my sage that I had gotten a couple years back in South Dakota. So, and we have some sassafras leaf from yesterday, medicinal. So again, this is Bell Labs, radio astronomy, frequency, control of nature, control grid system, hyper control. And, do we want it? That's the thing, because I think we could say no. I think we could still say no, and that we don't want it, and that we want something different. And so off to next up, Bellcore, where Scott Stornetta developed the document timestamp ledger. All right, so I'm at my next stop. It was about an hour or so away. I didn't realize New Jersey was so wide, but I was pretty close to the shore, and now I've moved inland towards the little low mountain range. I think it's called the Waktung Mountains. Let me get this so that you can see the top of my head. So I'm in Morristown, New Jersey, and I'm actually, you can see if you look this way, that office building, it's Allison's office park tour. This is, we're at 445 South Street, Morristown, New Jersey. It's the address here on this paper. And we're here because really the reason that I figured I couldn't put off going out to Bell Labs any further was, and I can't remember if I talked about it last time. I talked about some stuff in the live stream and then I had to redo it because the quality was so bad. But essentially we're doing this because the merge is coming with the Ethereum from the main net, which is like cryptography based and very energy intensive, to so proof of work, the energy intensive cryptography, to proof of stake. And I feel like since Ethereum is primarily this smart contract layer, and that's all of these smart contracts are documents in the metaverse of how you interface with people and money and smart internet of whatever, everything with these internets of agreements, that this is what's coming next, right, is the open metaverse. And we can see this with the push now also for biotechnology and everything's like coming online now, right? Once we get sort of our unique identifiers and we're trackable in time and space, that's what the metaverse is about. And when Jason and Lynn and Drew and I went to Salt Lake City, or Provo, really, in March, we went to the Mormon Transhumanist Conference because their focus was on blockchain, like a whole day just on blockchain with the Mormon Transhumanist affiliates. And one of the keynote speakers there was Tamika Tilleman, and that sort of cemented the deal. If you weren't sure that you should be going to Provo to learn about blockchain from the Mormon Transhumanist Association, the fact that Tamika Tilleman, who is high level with the State Department and then led New America think tank, funded largely by Google, into sort of impact finance, Bretton Woods 2, and digital identity, there wasn't really going to be a better time to go to Provo. So that's what we did. And we spent all day sort of listening to talks. And again, it was a room full of a couple hundred people who, most of whom seemed unwilling to acknowledge what it was that they were actually building. Or they were imagining that only the good things, and they were telling us we were imagining only the bad things. But they started off with Evan McMullen, who was an independent candidate for president and a Wharton grad, so Philadelphia connection there, and had formerly been longtime career CIA. And I'm asking him, like, how is this going to work with this smart contract layer, since it's all being run through, the tech is built on Google, which is backed by the government, and also In-Q-Tel, which is Niantic.
Moving forward, our digital identity will be interfacing in smart city environments, not only with one another, but with the built environment. I'm from Philadelphia, and we have a lot of involvement with Niantic, which was funded by In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm. And so I'm just wondering, as we move into a future where we're engaging in built environments, how does state intelligence overlap in that space, especially in times in which there might be people who dissent from, changes that are underway? I'm just curious, given your background.
I just don't know yet, and I I'm still, I've been more focused on the regulatory side of things as I try to get up to speed, frankly, on the space. I do come from a national security background, and I understand the national security implications, broadly. But my focus now is more on ensuring that we have a regulatory environment where innovation in the space can thrive and where we don't fall behind as a country because we've ceded the space to China, for example.
Our playful smart cities are literally backed by the CIA's venture capital arm, like In-Q-Tel, and led by Michael Crow at Arizona State. And how is that going to be liberation, right? This guy was sort of definitely pitching deregulation and conservative, and it's all going to be good. And I'm like, you come out of Wharton, you come out of the CIA. How is the metaverse? How is this open metaverse being tracked through the video game augmented reality layer of your life going to work out? Like, to me, that seems like I live in a city that's targeted for this in Philadelphia, and I imagine that it's really complex and there are a lot of ethical problems. But for the most part, everyone's like, no, we're not going to talk about the ethical stuff. We're just going to assume it's mostly good, right? Because why? Why do we think that BlackRock's Aladdin computer is going to, work with DARPA and the NSA and Homeland Security and everyone else to make it all good for everybody? Like, I'm just not buying it, their cybernetic plan. So anyway, at the end of the day, one of the last speakers was Scott Stornetta. And Scott Stornetta is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he did mention that in when he started his talk. He was like, I'm really excited to be here because I often get to talk about my work, but I don't often get to talk about it within the context of my faith practice. And this is like really special for me. So, and again, I have friends that are members of the church. So this is not me throwing shade. I'm just providing context that he is a member of the church, and he's at the Mormon Transhumanist Association to speak about his important work that dates back to 1991, which is this paper. So this paper, the research that was done was developed at the building behind me, which is no longer, but used to be part of Bellcore. And as I mentioned earlier, when we were at over in Holmdel, that Bell Labs, eventually Bell was broken up, I think like 1984. They broke up the Bells into the baby Bells, and so that really disrupted centralized research and development for Bell, the Bell company. But they had some small spin-offs. So one of them was Bellcore, Bellcore. And so the work Scott Stornetta did with a colleague here, Stuart Haber, Stuart Stuart, essentially was some of the early pioneering work in distributed ledger technology. And the thing that I've been hammering out lately in all of my talks is sure, you can talk about Bitcoin and you can talk about fraudulent crypto and you can talk about the money stuff and central bank digital currency, but if you're not equally spending time on the smart contract layer in augmented reality, you're not actually helping. If you're limiting the conversation to money as we currently understand it, like some sort of representation of a digital currency as we currently know it, you haven't figured out the game, because the game is, as Jason has long said, freedom tokens. What's coming is that these tokenized access to everything, tokenized relationships, tokenized biological processes, tokenized mobility, tokenized education, tokenized job access, everything becomes a token. Token, who's got the token? And, I think I mentioned in the live stream, but I didn't mention it in the follow-up, I forgot. But so in Philadelphia, back in the 30s during the Depression, there was something called Horn and Hard Art. And Horn and Hard Art was essentially a cafeteria that all of the food was behind little glass doors. You had your main plate and you had dessert. And it was actually, for the Depression, pretty high end, white tablecloths. They had really beautiful coffee crafts and they were really known for their good coffee. But Horn and Hard Art, if you wanted to get your food, you had to put in the token. And the token wasn't exactly I guess it's not unlike today with arcades where you have to trade your money in for their token. It's like script, right? It's the company town. And these tokens are going to get more and more insidious as they go into every crevice, not just of human life, but also nature, because they want to tokenize everything in nature too with their nanotech smart dust and NEMS, nano-electronical machine systems, and MEMS, microelectronical machine systems. And all of these systems like came out of the telecommunications company along with aerospace. And now it's gone from them being out there to being in here. Like that's the transition. We're on the verge in the next decade or so of that being the transition. So as we're looking at this merge within the Ethereum from the mainnet to the beacon chain, which is I mentioned over at Bell Labs, it was like weirdly infested with lanternflies. I'm driving down the highway and I'm looking over and I'm like, there's a lanternfly climbing up the window on the inside of my car. I'm like, get out. I waited till we parked here and I let him out. But the lanternflies sort of remind me, they sync a little bit to the beacon. There was not a real reason that these lanternflies were crawling all over the water tower, because usually they like trees. But this water tower was infested with lanternflies, and a lot of them got on me too. So so the beacon chain. And I just want to throw this idea out there because I don't think it's too far off, because I've talked about it way back, at least 18 months ago, is my understanding of the metaverse in relationship to Adobe, and the fact that Adobe was the anchor tenant in Silicon Slopes, which is sort of in the Wasatch Range between Salt Lake City and Provo. Those Silicon Slopes is this emerging tech hub that came out of nowhere about 10 years ago. It's like a stone's throw from the NSA Bluffdale data center, and it all pops up, and the anchor tenant is Adobe. And so what I've often said about Utah's place in all of this is that what the University of Utah was really big on, and I guess later, so there's different pieces. So the University of Utah, their computer department was essentially set up it was a spin-off out of Berkeley, the Project Genie, and they were meant to, in the computer science area, work on graphic design and file compression, because that's what's going to be the metaverse, is like our life turned into some sort of digital representation and compressed in a file and secured with a token in terms of future access, like a permissioned file. And if you understand that piece, then the role of Adobe in Silicon Slopes, and the fact that literally in this development, the building goes over the roadway. It's not gated, but it has sort of this ceremonial entrance, and when you go off the main street into the corporate campus of these mixed emerging technology companies, you're actually driving under Adobe, like it's the gateway. And so I think that the file compression and the graphics, combined with the fact that the first virtual item was at University of Utah was this teapot, like all of the world is going to be digitized and thrown into the metaverse, and then it's accessible only on tokenized access, permissioned access, just like a video game, that you can't level up into new parts of the game unless you have the proper credentials, you have the proper certs, you can show that you've achieved some skill level, or you have like access. And it's not unlike the military, right? Like you have security levels and access levels, and certain people can only access certain things. And so the whole world is going to start to be that. Like, do you want to unlock this digital experience? Well, then you have to have the right token. And if you don't have it, then you have to figure out how to get it, and then go get it. And maybe that costs like some sort of other token to get that money, or maybe it costs time or conformative behavior. Like that's what's coming with this time stamping. And I think that when this document, which was called How to Timestamp a Digital Document, in the Journal of Cryptology from 1991, the International Association of Cryptologic Research, the documents aren't just going to be like a PDF like we imagine today with Adobe, like we're sending people a PDF like our fax or whatever, and it has a stamp. No, this is going to be a whole experience, a virtual reality experience, maybe a memory, maybe a different experiential opportunity. Like there's going to be a lot of other stuff going on with digital documents, digital information, because really the whole world is going to be made digital, and it's going to be fractured across all of these different endpoints. And I think that's this multiverse concept. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name, and I apologize that I don't have it right off, but he was in Princeton. He was either at the university or at the Institute for Advanced Study. And like he was a physicist, and what he was talking about was like the Schrodinger's cat experiment, but that like the cat is in the box and it's both alive or dead because of the gas. And you don't know till you open up the door if it's alive or dead. But once you touch the door, you're engaged by sort of quantum entanglement in the thing. So there are two universes that split off, one in which the cat is dead and one is which the cat is not dead, or one is which you open the door and you didn't open the door. So there are these tremendous branching future possibilities. And that's what that movie was that I saw this week, was the Everything Everywhere All at Once, was what happens when the universe fractures across different pathways, and how do you access alternate pathways. In this case, the woman, she was, she and her husband sort of managed a not so well off laundromat, and she had sort of a, not the best, most exciting life, but she had other versions of herself that had more exciting ways to live and had different talents. So at certain times she could like tap in to the experience, the life experience of these other versions of herself. And she was Evelyn, like Evelyn, in this. And so I sort of feel like if we're talking about like space-time continuum in the metaverse, and like maybe they do have files where you met this person or you didn't meet this person, or you made the train or you didn't make the train. And I think there was an old movie called Sliding Doors or something that was about that depending on what you can unlock with your tokens, you can access, but they have to be anchored in time, because if they're disconnected, you'll never know how to get back to it, like in the filing cabinet. And I've mentioned, a lot of people know a lot more than I do about like these Akashic record systems, but this would be like the cybernetic version of like the noetic file information system of magnificent consciousness. Is like, they've got like a blockchain version, and it's like this big compared to the universe, right? But they think that they're going to be the engineers in control of this little bitty piece here. So, so behind me, I made a little heart. I have my ladies there. And again, I walk into these corporate office campuses and I never know what I'm going to find to make something beautiful. And I was looking around just to figure out like where to put it. And so it's interesting, like a lot of these places are near water. So some of it's stormwater, but there's sort of a creek back there. And there's, I don't know, you can see there's like a picnic table. It's actually kind of nice here. I mean, it's got some shady trees. So of course I go around the edge looking for the evergreen trees because I thought that would be nice. And well, you can see the heart. There it is. So some of these trees were cypress trees. And it's interesting to me because a cypress is actually, it symbolizes immortality, like eternal life. It's actually was sort of in a lot of the myths too. And so it's interesting because these folks want to peddle radical life extension, but they want to do it as like a blockchain mind file. Really, they would like to put you in a little box and store you away so that they can refer to you for the AI. And they want to call that radical life extension. Or we could send you to Mars, or we could do all these things. But like, we already have access to that without being in their box. And in fact, to me, agreeing to their radical life extension techniques and being in their little box would be like being in permanent purgatory. Not a good option. And then you lose access to the whole process of being part of the universe again when your time here is done. So when I found these cypress trees, they had all of the little cones. So those are the green things that you see. So there's green there, and then let me see, maybe you can see it. Yeah, so there's, when I was looking for a place, and it's hard to see now because I think it's gotten covered up, but there was a little dandelion and it was just totally fluffed, and that's where I decided to put it because I thought the dandelion was perfect. And so I put it by the dandelion, but now a lot of it has blown away. But that was the centerpiece here in the mulch under the beautiful evergreens. And so I have some Dusty Miller there. I put around, so we have the cypress cones, and then we have the cattail fluff from yesterday at Vanguard, and we have some Dusty Miller and some beautiful like sphagnum moss. There's a lot of bugs around here too. Little yellow jacket season, some big ants, some little spiders. I picked a couple of yellow flowers off of the bedding plants, and I have in there a peridot and some of the shell from the Cretaceous beds earlier this morning over at the Porous Sea Fossil Beds. And I have lichen and then a big bunch of cones around the outside edge, so you can sort of see how that goes. And you can see there were also some birch. There was some birch there in the park. And so I pulled off a little bit of the birch bark and I wrote some words on there. And the words that I used, I did love, surprise, surprise. So I did love, and then I did sacred, and then I did nature, and then I did real. So those were the words, and I want to point out when I was doing the Louise Erdrich reading, like what she was talking about, the Ojibwe-Moan, the early the Ojibwe people, like the first books in what is now North America, like they were writing on birch, and actually they might have been using their teeth, like dentillation, to tell, like to put their stories, to imprint their stories onto nature, which is pretty cool. So I don't know how to bite things onto to bark, but I wrote it with a pen. So the love, sacred, nature, and real, because that's what we're still trying to connect to in this space. And I will say it's interesting, when I was at Bell Labs, the area over by Holmdel, it was much more of a coastal wetland. And so to me, that's interesting from a liminal standpoint, and also from a emergent creativity. Like marshes are really, the water of marshes and the sort of liquid and solid and the moving, like that feels a lot more like plasma and the metaverse. And over in that part, there was lots of Phragmites, which is an invasive plant to the East Coast and not native here, and it was clogging up things. So to me, that feels like the cybernetic invasion of the blockchain metaverse tentacles, is like the Phragmites getting into the wetland. But here, oddly enough, in this location where Scott Stornetta wrote his original blockchain distributed ledger paper, there actually are some beautiful cattails and things out there. So that was a nice sign, just a difference between native and invasive. And I think that this blockchain mind virus thing is the invasive in this equation. So let me see what else I was going to say. So Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber, in 1994, after writing this paper, they founded a company called Surety. And I think it's essentially like the oldest blockchain company. So Surety, Surety. And then now, so he's mostly retired again. I saw him in person. He was wearing like a red Mr. Rogers sweater. He was there with his wife, and I handed them some of our brochures, and he just kind of stared at me, because he does, I'm sure that they do know what they're building, because he is currently a fellow at something called the Creative Destruction Lab. And the Creative Destruction Lab is sort of an emerging tech accelerator out of the business school at the University of Toronto. So he's working there with them. The areas that they're focused on in terms of supporting emerging tech are AI, health, I can't read my handwriting, neuro, quantum, space, and they're working in all of these things that, are going to creatively disrupt like all of that, like all of natural life. Like they're the Phragmites in the situation, and they think it's great. I think that maybe they think that they can hold the world, in the palm of their hand. And, almost done with the Orson Scott Card book, but at this, they're talking about like travel across into the outside, into this other dimension. And Jane, who is this sort of super AI, has to hold the pattern. Like they have to hold the pattern in their mind to be able to like move beings or objects into the outer space and then into other locations in their world. And it's interesting to think about, right? Like the multiverse is, there's this place where potentiality lives. And if you can get into that space where the potentiality lives, and you have a pattern, that you have to hold on to your pattern so you can get back out. But if you have a pattern of something that you want to have happen, like you could have that happen in the space beyond, because the rules are totally different, which is how they talk about nano. And so I feel like they're playing around in these spaces, but they think that they can be like Jane, the quantum AI computer, and hold these patterns in their machines. But they can't. I don't think that they can hold these patterns in their machines. There's too much, and it's hubris, and like I think it goes against God and nature personally. So I'm just going to read a few bits of this paper. I'll put a link to the PDF of it in the comments when I get this up on YouTube, because I think, again, we're navigating information, we're navigating a lot of different kinds of information, and it's all competing for your attention. And so I feel like I have about maybe, I don't know, a few hundred people, maybe more than that, somewhere like these things get viewed maybe, if they're pretty good, 1,000 times, right? So I'm here to say, I think we need to devote more attention to the smart contract layer, and to this merge, and to Web3, and to know where it came from, because there are a lot of people out there who want to say, oh, we got hijacked. And I'm like, no, 1991, Bell, your telephone company goes back to the 1870s. Didn't get hijacked. This is just a logical extension. And until we can look in ourselves for what led to this outcome, thinking that we can control things, I don't think it's going to get any better. So we need to actually spend more time, and I think spending time looking at Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber's work, understanding the ledger system, because that's the thing I was very clear about with impact finance. It's the big accounting firms that are behind it. They're setting up the contracts. It's the Accentures, the Deloittes, the KPMG. And the contracts, like in the metaverse of contracts, the Internet of Agreements, that's this other guy who was at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference, Vinay Gupta, I think. He's all with like the humanitarian stuff and hexayurt things. He's with the Internet of Agreements, right? So the lawyers and the accountants are going to write up these agreements, or, you know, who knows? Like, are the religious people, are the religious leaders in on the contracting? Are we contracting religion now? Because that's what it feels like where it's going to me. So all of these contracts are being made, and we're going to be expected to live by them, and we don't even know what they are. And that is the game. That is the game that is coming. So I'm going to read a little bit of this paper and ask you to look into the distributed ledger system and understand that these digital documents, I think, are actually like virtualized experiences, in-game experiences that we're going to have to earn the right to access. And so just like, you know, someone, you know, equated me with being a file that was annotated. Like, who is able to access my file, right? And that's also part of that whole Pornima thing, like the credential. Let me access your information. This is all part of this timestamp stuff, but it's time. The time is really key because this is space-time continuum. The metaverse is going to be space-time, and we actually have to anchor it in time, or it's going to get all messy. So I think the time piece is really central. And and this ties in with the Orologium and the Kelpius and the monks and at the American Philosophical Society that I talked about in the Biden talk. Okay, so I'm not going to read this all. It's 13 pages, but I'm going to read a few bits. How to Timestamp a Digital Document by Stuart Haber and W. Scott Stornetta, Bellcore, 445 South Street, Morristown, New Jersey, 07960, USA. Oh, and I will say, so again, Bellcore isn't here anymore. I think eventually it got turned into something Telecordia, something else, and then eventually it got bought out by Ericsson, maybe. But I will say, the one thing I almost forgot. Later on, after Stornetta left, but some of the work that they did here was about portability of phone numbers, okay? And I'm sure that we can imagine that seems super convenient, right? A portability of your phone number, right? Like, you change your phone, but you can keep your number because everything lives in the phone now, right? Like, the phone is our extended brain. But I would say once we know that the phone is our extended brain, and actually the phone is the core anchor point to our digital twin, the idea of a permanent phone number is the same as your permanent digital identifier in the metaverse, guys. So like when Bellcore was working on getting you your portable phone number so you could keep your number when you changed your phone service, ultimately where that went with biophysics and the Atomic Energy Commission was like, we know where you are in the game at all times, right? The CIA knows where you are in the game at all times. And who would ever think that it had to do with portable phone numbers? It's crazy. And all the people who go to work every day in these cubicles and build the technology that leads to the portable phone numbers thinking they're doing everybody a favor for their convenience. They don't get it. Like, they don't see out the 20 years. So I can only say this in retrospect. It seems really obvious to me what was going on there with the portable phone numbers. But yeah, it's going to be your digital identity. It's going to be your unique internet single sign-on. It's going to be your portal to your digital twin that represents you in the digital sphere with all of its opportunities and limitations. So, okay, so abstract. The prospect of a world in which all text, audio, picture, and video documents are in digital form on easily modifiable media raises the issue of how to certify when a document was created or last changed. Okay, that's the space-time continuum. The problem is to timestamp the data, not the medium. We propose computationally practical procedures for digital timestamping of such documents so that it is infeasible for a user either to backdate or forward date his document, even with the collusion of a timestamping service. Our procedures maintain complete privacy of the documents themselves and require no record keeping by the timestamping service. Okay, so I think that the whole privacy part, again, that's the secret network. That's Enigma Protocol, MIT, and Intel now is the secret network. Now this is very interesting. I don't know if you can see this part here. Okay, this is a quote. So this is right after the abstract, right, is this quote here. It's from Shakespeare's tragedy poem, The Rape of Lucrece. Now, The Rape of Lucrece was essentially about a Roman, like it was set in Roman times, and the soldiers were all hanging out and bragging about their wives. And one of the soldiers was bragging about his wife's chastity. And so when the soldiers came back to where the women were, it was shown to be right that the wife that was said to be chaste, she was busy doing spinning or sewing or something while all the other wives were out dancing. And so it was like, oh. And so one of the colleagues of the guy who was bragging about his wife's chastity decided to rape her just to prove that he could. And he did. And then she ended up like explaining what happened and like killing herself for the shame of being raped. And so this is the quote here, and it's about time. But what an odd choice to open up this paper that is essentially the outline of the metaverse. To me, that's a really, I can't totally explain what the thinking was beyond, oh, this is kind of an interesting quote about time, but I feel like there has to be something more to it. So here is the quote from The Rape of Lucrece. Time's glory is to calm contending kings, to unmask falsehood and bring truth to light, to stamp the seal of time in aged things, to wake the morn and sentinel the night, to wrong the wronger till he render right. And so I can sort of imagine, because clearly like members of the church are pretty, like they have a lot of certain standards about social standards, religious standards, like about wrong and right and time and truth. But I think that to stamp the seal of time in aged things, that's holding space, you know, within the space-time continuum in the metaverse, the quadrants across time and space. Because if you can't go back in the file cabinet and find the document, you're going to lose it, right? So they need the anchor point, and I think the anchor point is both in the geographic area and in the time area. If they don't have the time, they're going to lose track of all the pieces of the metaverse. This is from the introduction. In many situations, there is a need to certify the date of a document. A document was created or last modified. For example, in intellectual property matters, it is sometimes crucial to verify the date an inventor first put in writing a patentable idea in order to establish its precedence over competing claims. One accepted procedure for timestamping a scientific idea involves daily notations of one's work in a lab notebook. The dated entries are entered one after another in the notebook with no pages left blank. The sequentially numbered sewn-in pages of the notebook make it difficult to tamper with the record without leaving telltale signs. If the notebook is then stamped on a regular basis by a notary, public, or reviewed and signed by the manager, the validity of the claim is further enhanced. If the precedence of the inventor's idea is later challenged, both the physical evidence of the notebook and the established procedure serve to substantiate the inventor's claims of having had the ideas on or before a given date. There are other methods of timestamping. This ensures, for example, one can mail a letter to oneself and leave it unopened. This ensures that the enclosed letter was created before the time postmarked on the envelope. Businesses incorporate more elaborate procedures into their regular order of business to enhance the credibility of their internal documents should they be challenged at a later date. For example, these methods may ensure that the records are handled by more than one person, so that any tampering with a document by one person will be detected by another. But all these methods rest on two assumptions. First, the records can be examined for telltale signs of tampering, and second, that there is another party that views the document whose integrity or impartiality is seen as vouchsafing the claim. We believe these assumptions are called into serious question for the case of documents created and preserved exclusively in digital form. This is because electronic digital documents are so easy to tamper with, and the change need not leave any telltale sign on the physical medium. What is needed is a method of timestamping digital documents with the two following properties. First, we must find a way to timestamp the data itself without any reliance on the characteristics of the medium on which the data appears, so that it is impossible to change even one bit of the document without the change being apparent. And second, it should be impossible to stamp a document with a time and data different from the actual one. The purpose of this paper is to introduce a mathematically sound and computationally practical solution to the time stamping problem. In the sections that follow, we consider a naive solution to the problem, the digital safety deposit box. This serves the pedagogical purpose of highlighting additional difficulties associated with digital time stamping beyond those found in conventional methods of time stamping. Successive improvements to this naive solution finally lead to practical ways to implement digital time stamping. And then I'll just read this next paragraph that's called the setting. The setting for our problem is a distributed network of users, perhaps representing individuals, different companies, or divisions within a company. We refer to the users as clients. Each client has a unique identification number. A solution to time stamping may have several parts. There is a procedure that is performed immediately when a client desires to have a document time stamped, and there should be a method for the client to verify that this procedure has been correctly performed. There should also be a procedure for meeting a third party's challenge with the validity of a document timestamp. As with any cryptographic problem, it is a delicate matter to characterize precisely the security achieved by a timestamping scheme. A good solution to the timestamping problem is one for which, under reasonable assumptions about computational ability of the user, of the scheme, and the complexity of the computational problem, and possibly about the trustworthiness of the users, it is difficult or impossible to produce false timestamps. Naturally, the weaker the assumptions needed, the better. And then it goes on to talk about the naive solution, the digital safety deposit box, a trust stamping time service. Again, so the trust is sort of a hugely key word when it comes to blockchain. The digital signatures of documents, again, those are the tokens, and that's when I talked about Bell Labs and Linux and Unix and trust over IP. Like, that's all going to be, like, again, credential timestamps. They have two different schemes for them. That's section 5. There's a lot of equations. I don't really get all the equations. Distributed trust, right? Distributed trust in 1991, right here. Look, you got this right here, right? The enemy isn't outside, goat. Well, it's not enemy, but the challenge, the challenge to natural life isn't coming from away. It's coming from, in the United States, folks, it's coming from here. It's coming from New Jersey. It's coming from the Center of Signals Intelligence. Okay, so then it just goes on, practical applications, and I guess I'll read this summary. Okay, so in this paper, we have shown that the growing use of text, audio, and video documents in a digital form and the ease with which such documents can be modified creates a new problem. How can we certify when a document was created or last modified? Methods of certification or timestamping must satisfy two criteria. First, they must timestamp the actual bits of the document, making no assumptions about the physical medium on which the document is recorded. And second, the date and time must not be forgeable. We have proposed two solutions. Both involve the use of one-way hash functions whose outputs are processed in lieu of the actual documents of digital signatures. The solutions differ only in the way that the date and time are made unforgettable or unforgeable. In the first, the hashes of the document are submitted to a TSS or linked together, and certificates recording the linking of a given document are distributed to other clients upstream and downstream from that document. Again, that's the blockchain. In the second solution, several members of the client pool must timestamp the hash, and the members are chosen by means of a pseudo-random generator that use the hash of the document as a seed. This makes it infeasible to choose deliberately which client should and should not timestamp a given hash. The second method could be implemented without the need for a centralized TSS at all. And I'm wondering if the second random assessment may be proof of stake. Like the first one is the cryptographic proof, and the second one is the staking, which is like having other people who aren't connected vouch for the timestamp. Finally, we have considered whether timestamping could be extended to enhance the authenticity of the documents for which the time of creation itself is not the critical issue. This is the case for a large class of documents which we call tamper unpredictable. We further conjecture that no purely algorithmic scene can add any more credibility to a document than timestamping provides. We gratefully acknowledge helpful discussions with Donald Beaver, Shimon Evan, George Furness, Bert Kaliski, Ralph Merkel, Jeff Schrager, Peter Winkler, Yakov Jacobi, and Modi Jung. So So there we go. So we've got, that's sort of where we're at with timestamping documents. I know that's a little boring, and I can't make it more exciting. I mean, I wish I could. This stuff isn't super memeable, other than like, do you want to live in the CI's video game? As, you know, a blockchain mind file. And, you know, that's the thing. When they're talking about the bioeconomy, precision medicine, life extension, that's all on the blockchain. That's all these timestamp documents. And if they want to give you some sort of ongoing gene therapy, they're going to track all that on your blockchain health record. That's why they need the blockchain digital twins. So, you know, everyone's always asking for the solution. And I don't have the solution by myself. I don't have the solution, but I do have a lot of clarity around what I feel is the nature of the problem, given the information I have right now. And so that's why I'm talking to you, and that's why I'm going out and trying to put intentions for sacred, natural, real, loving things into the world, into the places where, knowingly or not, these very harmful things happened. And we need to rebalance. So, to the beauty bowl. All right, so that's that. Hopefully I'm gonna get in one more stop to the main current Bell Labs on the way back home. All right, last stop of the day. This is the third Bell Labs site. So we were at the Aereo Saarinen campus in Holmdel, and then I went to the Bellcore building in Morristown. And now I'm at the main campus, and this is the Nokia Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey, I think. And I'll just sort of show you around the campus here. You can see it's pretty sizable. I wasn't sure the original Bell Labs was in New York City with Western Electric and AT&T, and then eventually I think technically Bell Labs goes back to as far as like 1907, and then at some point in the city of New York, to work on all of these the acoustical sound stuff, it was too noisy. There were too many frequency things going on, and so they set up this campus that was out here. And so I wasn't sure where the earlier campus was, like from the 30s or 40s, but clearly this is it. I'm looking at the buildings and I can see that not a ton of them, but they've been glommed on. There's older buildings and then newer additions and newer additions and newer additions on top of it. So it's immaculately kept. It's very, I'm sitting here in the Claude Shannon Amphitheater area. So there's you can see behind me his little, monument to Claude Shannon, who is the father of information theory and worked at Bell Labs for 35 years. And then I have one of my little installations down there. So between Bellcore and this site, I stopped in at the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge, which was interesting. They just had a boardwalk that went out about half a mile into the swamp, and there wasn't a lot of standing water. I mean, it's August, so you know, such as it is, wasn't super. It was, you know, you could tell it was a swamp because lots of the trees were like perched up on their tippy toes, but there wasn't a whole lot going like on water-wise in the swamp. But it was nice to walk through, and it was very green where it wasn't muddy, and then lots of ferns and lots of moss. And because I was up on the boardwalk, I couldn't actually collect a lot of things, but I collected some beautiful red leaves and a little bit of fern and a little bit of one fungi, a purple one, which was kind of cool, and like some turkey fan sort of fungus, and yeah, and so I brought out a few things, and it's interesting because I was getting into my car. Now, this whole part of New Jersey that I've never really been in, because New Jersey is a small state, but it's very eclectic, and so this is sort of, you know, the northern half and the western half. And so it's very, very shishi. very, very nice big houses, some very big estates. It seems like sort of horse country, lots of horse fences and equestrian zones and, golf centers and various things out here. Very affluent, but in the middle of it is this giant swamp. And it's not an open swamp, it's a very wooded swamp, but it's a huge amount of open space. And so where we're at in Nokia Labs, it's probably only about 5-7 miles from the Great Swamp Wildlife Refuge. So I got some things in my basket, and I'm getting ready to get back in my car, and I see that there's this young guy getting some stuff out of his car. Actually, I bumped into him at the way station at the trailhead, and I see him getting a trumpet out of his car and asking people about like where to go, and he has a trumpet, and I'm thinking, that's interesting. And so I pull out one of my brochures. I'm like, do you know it's all about acoustics, right? And he's like, what? And he was like a youngish guy, I don't know, maybe mid-20s. And I'm like, yeah, it's about acoustics. Like, JCR Licklider, who is the head of DARPA, like he was a psychoacoustics. This is about acoustics. And, this stuff is coming up today. Have you heard of the Metaverse? And, the smart contract layer, this Ethereum merge is going to be happening. And he's like, yeah, I think it's actually going to be happening in a few hours. And I'm like, wow, because I thought it was tomorrow, but I guess it's dynamic, so maybe it's coming up soon. And I'm like, yeah, I think this is really key to unfolding this metaverse, but it's the CIA's video game. And so at that point, he's looking at me a little sideways, but he's got his trumpet and he's walking into the swamp. And so I pull out to go to the next spot, and I see some goldenrod that I want, and some ironweed, and some purple, beautiful yellow and purple. I love that. And so I pull over, like just as I'm about to leave the exit the park, to get my scissors out and trim up some goldenrod and ironweed. And then I hear him, I hear the trumpet across the swamp. Although it was just like that, dun, da, 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 da. So it wasn't super sophisticated music, but there was trumpeting through the swamp on the day, potentially, of the Ethereum merge. So that was a bit odd. I don't know if that was in the CIA's planned video game for the day. But then I moved on to this campus, and it's again, you don't expect something that essentially is installing like the total psyop to be so pretty. Like, it's this very landscaped place, big campus, different ages of buildings. And one of the buildings that I wanted to actually go see, it was the oldest, I'm gonna say this wrong, anechoic chamber, like A-N, and then echo, like echo, ick, anechoic chamber. And it's what they use to test acoustical things, because there's no reverberation at all. It has these two wedge-shaped things all over the ceiling. The floor is wire, and it has stuff to soundproof all of it. And the whole thing is essentially, like, I guess, unless you're making noise, it's silent. Like, it's so silent that you can hear your heartbeat.
In this case, from a special room at Nokia Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey. It's called the anechoic chamber, and when it was built in 1940, it was the quietest room in the world.
So this room is called the anechoic chamber. It's a fancy word, but it's just anechoic, no echo. That's all it really means. And what it is comprised of these sound-absorbing, they're wedges, so the sound enters and gets trapped just by constant reflection. Think of it as sort of squeezed down, and when it bounces around enough and it's absorbing material, it absorbs. And so it absorbs 99.9995% of sound, I think, and was actually one of the world's quietest rooms. I think a few have been built that are even quieter, but it's in the limit of the most quiet room. So why do we have one? What's it doing at Bell Labs? Well, think about early telephony. They wanted to understand how people heard sound on a handset. So, you hear here, but you also hear through your bone structure. And when you speak, you're resonating the bone structure back to your ear. So they really want to understand what was the perfect way to capture sound so that you could have a better telephone experience.
And it makes people go crazy. I guess they say the longest anyone has ever stayed in an anechoic chamber is 55 minutes. And some people can stay for half an hour, but most people want to leave within a few minutes, because essentially with no echo, you don't have a way of orienting. It's like sensory deprivation. And I feel like that's what we're going into with this mixed reality metaverse, is that we're going to be deprived of our actual senses and the actual world and the real, and then we're going to be putting it into taking our real senses away and giving us fake senses, and then we're not going to know what's real and what's not real, and it's all going to be like living in a hallucination. And so as I was walking around this this site has the oldest one, at least in North America, the oldest anechoic chamber. Now the most silent one is Microsoft. Microsoft has it, I think, in Washington State somewhere, but this is the oldest one. It's dates to the late 40s. And on this campus, they actually did a ton of World War II research here around radar and frequency. And it's interesting, I was looking up Claude Shannon's sort of background, and they said it was typical for Bell Labs, especially during the war with so many men away, that they would hire women to do the computations, and they actually literally called them human computers. They called these women human computers, and that was like supposed to be cute, but so Bell Labs had a lot of human computers, and now who knows, like now we're turning us into metaverse agents, I guess. So, I'm just not sure what else to say about the Nokia stuff. This is my third Bell Lab of the day. There's so much money. So, I do remember. So, when they broke up the Big Bell into the baby bells, and eventually later on the telephone stuff went into Lucent. So there was a bit into AT&T, but most of it went into Lucent Technologies, and then Lucent became Alcatel. And then Lucent Alcatel was bought by Nokia, which is a Finnish company, and that was acquired in 2016. So that's and they're working 5G, 6G, all the Gs, the metaverse. Outside of the anechoic chamber, it was also an auditorium. The Shannon, named after this guy Claude Shannon, and it had a big sticker on the outside exit doors that said wireless painting with light, and it was all these weird shapes and things. And I feel like they just want us to live in a psychedelic color world that doesn't really mean anything, and then use our reactions to that to train the AI. Claude Shannon, he did a lot with circuits. He did a lot with cryptography in World War II. And I think this idea of telecommunications, signals, circuits, secrets, control, once you realize that the whole universe is made up of information and curated information, and that we're storytellers, and that soon, trustworthy information is only going to come from the machines, so the machines are going to be the ones to tell us the stories of what is real and what is not real. And as I was walking along this boardwalk today in the swamp, and I was just thinking, cultures have their cosmologies, right? They have the stories they tell about why the world is the way it is, and how they came into being, and how they understand the world around them. And the more that these sort of eggheady scientists, technicians get into the deep, deep parts of theoretical physics, it seems like a lot of the aspects of the original indigenous knowledges that were so discounted, like they're coming back around, only they're co-opting it all, right? And I would just really hate for the day where the machines are the only ones who are allowed to say what is true, and to let you have access to what is true, right? Because I can imagine a day if everything is controlled on a circuit and a relay with encryption. We're not going to be able to know very much. We're not. And especially if they run the world on recurring pandemics and make us disconnect from one another and the natural world, and sit in a pod and put our brain in a robot. It's really horrible. And, I'm still here in the real. I don't know, there's some people out there who must think I'm fake, or that someone's paying, that this is my job to go in the swamp and gather red leaves and stop and talk to trumpeters and, be wowed by purple fungi, the delicate lavender, and fluff some cattails and try to figure out what's going on with these technologies that I never even knew existed. Oh my goodness, there's like an amazing hawk coming in. Wow, it's beautiful. There's a lot of just robins and blue jays here, but I think a little kestrel just flew in. So like in the future, right, am I going to get to see that? Or if I have a good day, I've earned enough stars on my points that I might be able to see nature, like just directly, something as beautiful as a kestrel flying into this campus. I don't know, like, do you think that Claude Shannon knew what he was doing when he was talking about organizing information? Did he know what the downsides were? I mean, surely all these people at Bell Labs in World War II and the Cold War knew that they were doing it for the military, right? They knew they were doing it for the military, and of course they live in the story that they're doing it for the military, and it's a good reason, because we're being safe. And that's what's going to come next, is everything has to be done for safety. Safe, safe, safe. So we have to not live so we can be safe. And I think that's a terrible choice for the children. So I hope you've enjoyed my day at Bell Labs in New Jersey. I don't think I'm making it to the deserted village, although like it's just a bit over the hill that way. I would really love to see the deserted village. Maybe I'll have to come back. There's a whole other radar installation that's near Rutgers, New Brunswick, where Einstein and those guys went. So maybe I'll make another trip. There's a Signals Intelligence Museum. So, you know, New Jersey is very rich with signals intelligence. And there's part of me, I hope in some way, that today was the day of the merge, and that maybe my hearts that I've left in all these places can float, throw a couple switches, blow out a few fuses, bring some balance to the insanity that I think is going to be this this open metaverse run by Disney and the CIA and the Rockefeller Foundation and Google. I hope so. I hope it will be different. So here, I'm just going to stop, and then I'll go over and show you what I made. All right, so there's Claude Shannon, and he's got the big equations. And I'll just read this out to you. It says, IEEE milestone in electrical engineering and computing. I don't even know which glasses to wear for this. Okay, the mathematical development of information theory, 1939 to 1967. The mathematical principles of information theory laid down by Claude Elwood Shannon during the period 1939 to 1967 set in motion a revolution in communication systems engineering. They quantified the concept of information, established fundamental limits for the representation and reliable transmission of information, and revealed the architecture of systems for approaching them. And today, information theory continues to provide the foundation for advances in information collection, storage, distribution, and processing. And so, yeah, the world is made up of information, right? And Mr. Shannon helped us figure out how to organize it, and how to control it, and how to distribute it. And what happens when in the metaverse, everyone gets their different version of reality, right? But for now, some things are still real. So there's the ladies. I put out some cattail fluff because I just love the cattails, and I figure it'll blow around and find its way into where it needs to go because it's natural. And then this is the heart. So this, you can see the outline with the fern, and I actually heard some bark. There was a rotting bark off of a tree. And I got the big fungus in Media, Pennsylvania, but then I have the turkey ones, and they're beautiful. They're beautifully feathery and velvety. And then there's the purple one, right? Look at that, guys. It's so amazing. And then there's the goldenrod and the ironweed that I was picking while the trumpeter was playing to the swamp. And yeah, still some more of the little cones from Johns Hopkins, and acorns, because we're always planting seeds, guys. We're always planting seeds. And a spiral shell, because the spiral, right? I brought that from home. I can't remember where that little guy came from. I think it's a freshwater shell. And just the inside, the amazing inside of a walnut. So, yeah. So I'll just give you that building down there with the blue. That's the auditorium with the anaerobic or anechoic chamber is in there, and you can sort of see the older parts of the building and then glommed on. And then this has some older bits and then newer bits put in. There's like a low building there that looks like it's from the 50s or 60s. And then this is this very regimented amphitheater. I don't know if they gather here in mass for their corporate settings. But these, if you look closely at the windows, this building looks like it could be older. And then definitely newer, sort of maybe 80s or 90s with this copper roofing. Copper is interesting. I wanted to tell you one more thing, so I forgot. I had an email exchange with someone that I know from Twitter who actually worked for a long time out in Nebraska for various Bell companies, actually in like building this stuff, right? We always forget they do all of the guys with the equations, but somebody's actually building the stuff, and that's really physical hard work. And this person was telling me a little bit about spending time on their lunch hour reading the white papers way back, a long time ago, reading the Bell Labs white papers and trying to get a handle on what this company was about. And that when it transferred to Lucent, they did this whole rebranding, which was this red swooshy circle, right? The cybernetic swooshy circle, red and Lucent, right? And they said, a lot of the folks that were working in the factories there making all this stuff, they were really not so hip to the logo or the fact that all these millions of dollars were spent on the Silicon Valley firm to rebrand the company. And I think they called it like the flaming red butthole, or just red butthole or something like that, the logo for Lucent. And just talking about that, this is really hard physical work. And I think it's interesting because the building back there, you can see the roof is green, so I wonder if it's copper, because before, oh my goodness, there's a kestrel again. That's awesome. So with all the copper, that's what it was before fiber optic, and Bell Labs was sort of a leader in doing the fiber optic transmissions and doing that research. So that's what's coming, right? The light communication. But before it was wired, and it was the copper. And so this person was telling me like how, it's challenging work, carrying like 80-pound coils of copper wire all day, every day. Like it's a very physical job. And but at the time that the executives were all getting into like sort of their social justice, corporate do-gooderism thing, but like it didn't actually make conditions in their factory any better whatsoever. And so, there's just a lot of inconsistencies with this. And, the Nokia Bell Labs, that's the Internet of Everything, guys. That is literally, that's going to be everything connected, right? And no longer with copper, everything connected with light and nano and frequency. And I just can't even imagine what that's going to be like. And control systems and circuits and switches and routers and distribution of information and suppression of information. And, and blockchain will be your answer, right? Your answer of trustworthiness. And, I said the other day, like this woman came on and was like essentially implying that I was not trustworthy, like that the story that I was telling about myself was, she believed it was not true. And so like, what's going to be the answer? And the same thing with the Purnima Wah person. Like, I don't trust you. Show me your credentials. Show me your badges. I need your tokens. I only trust the machine. And like when you live in the digital world, that's going to be the thing. You're going to lean into the machine. You're going to trust the machine. And then the machine is going to tell you the story. The machine is going to tell you the story, and it's a damn machine built by the US military. It's an imperial machine. It's the ultimate imperial machine to run your brain, run your idea about reality, run your cosmology, and then eventually probably confine your body and mess with your mind. And I just don't see how people think it's okay. And like, again, thousands of people work here, thousands. Does it never occur to them what it is? Thousands of people, and they're not bad people. They just don't think. And we've never been taught to question if any of this is okay or where it's going. Oh well. The merge cometh either today or tomorrow. Thank you, Leo, for giving me a heads up, and Steffers, about this, and getting my ass in gear to finally get out and spend a day in central New Jersey. It's not my job, it's my calling, but it's a pretty weird calling to have. All right, bye.